from Constantine Sevier, the IPR director, Melanie Payne, the training and development manager of BOAC, the chief outlaw of PPB, and then myself on PSAP, as well as Mandy Hood in the back, who is the PSAP project director. After every update from the city, there will be time for questions and comments if you like, and Judith Mallory of OEHR will facilitate kind of like that process. We want to keep everything kind of as informal and as relaxed as possible. We're not trying to talk at you. This really is about facilitating information exchange so that we can go back to our bosses. I can go back to my boss with your feedback, letting him know what you need and what you want. And so at the end, there will be announcements and also an opportunity moving forward. Just what are your ideas for what this forum should look like, right? So what do you want to cover? I know it's not just a settlement agreement. There's a lot more going on in the city of Portland, obviously.
Get rid of outlaw.
And so doing that, I think, will kind of provide an opportunity to, I guess, shift what this forum looks like. And that will largely be community driven. So I'm looking forward to kind of hearing your thoughts on that. But Tracy, if you could kind of get us started with the updates on the settlement agreement, that would be great.
Thank you. And as Nicole said, my name is Tracy Reeve. I'm the Portland City Attorney. And I've been asked to probably to make all of the other speakers look more interesting after me to give a brief legal update on the settlement agreement and where we are on that front. And those of you who are who've been following this know that there was a lot of activity last summer. City Council held 4 different hearings on a number of ordinances, primarily that did a few things. One was to make some amendments to the settlement agreement that will still have to be approved by the court. Another was to change the Bureau's Directive 10-10-10, which concerns investigation of, among other things, officer-involved shooting protocols, and provides for all involved officers in officer-involved shootings to be interviewed as soon as practicable, and in any event within 48 hours. And there were some changes to the accountability system that Director Sevier, I'm sure, will touch on, and some other sort of legal details. Since that time, it may have seemed like there's been a little bit of radio silence, but there's actually been a lot of activity going on. Those amendments were approved in late August, finally, after a number of hearings. We then worked with the parties, which is the U.S. Department of Justice, the City of Portland, the Portland Police Association, and the amicus Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform to craft a path forward that involved a joint motion with the court to approve the settlement agreement amendments and to hold the next status conference. And that has now been set for April 19th. And there will be both a status conference and a hearing on the settlement agreement amendments. It took a while because, again, those of you who followed the procedure will recall that one of the issues about when police officers should be interviewed following an officer-involved shooting was whether by requiring an officer to give an interview right away, there was a risk that that officer, in the event that an officer was eventually determined to have acted criminally, that they would be immunized by having been compelled to give that statement. Sort of esoteric constitutional law, but we were all trying to thread the needle of ensuring both administrative accountability with a prompt officer-involved shooting statement and preserving the district attorney's ability to criminally prosecute should that ever be found to be warranted. Because the district attorney had concerns about it, after council passed the new Directive 10-10-10, we engaged in a couple-month-long process where we, the city attorney's office, members of the Portland Police Bureau, members of the district attorney's team, and representatives from the U.S. Department of Justice worked out some standard operating procedures for the police that sort of minimized the risk that the compelled statement in the administrative proceeding would negatively impact the criminal proceeding. So that took a while, which is part of the reason that we're only now getting to the court. The motion to amend by all of the parties, and this was really great news, I think, that we developed a path forward that was all of the parties, including the enhanced amicus AMAC, filed the stipulated motion, and so that's, what we're now steering toward at the April 19th hearing. That includes the framework for the PSEP, which is the replacement entity for the COAB, and Nicole will give more details about where that is this evening. There's activity underway to get that process up and running. And in the meantime, aside from the amendments and everybody sort of saying, okay, these are the places we need to go to get this across the finish line, there's been a lot of work ongoing. And so I mentioned that we have a path forward for the PSEP that has been agreed to by all of the parties and the enhanced amicus. In addition to the 10-10-10 directive that I mentioned that City Council adopted, the revised suite of force policies, that was one of the major elements that we were revising those policies to comply with the settlement agreement, has occurred. And as I mentioned, there's been changes to the accountability system, and Director Severe will talk about those. The Bureau now has a second review period. Previously, when the Bureau was reviewing a directive and posting it for universal review, it posted the version of the directive that was going to be reviewed, made changes, took comment at that initial time, and then there wasn't a second posting of the redlined version. That's now happened at the request of community members. Dan Handelman was a tireless advocate for that. That's now been implemented so that the public has a couple of different points in the process when policies are under review. It probably, again, sounds somewhat arcane, but there's been a lot of work continuing to improve the Bureau's internal audit capacity to track its own force data, to track its data regarding providing police services to people with mental illness or experiencing mental health crisis. That's really what's going to enable the Bureau, once we are fully compliant and DOJ is no longer, and the COCL are no longer, and the community and the PSEP are no longer monitoring us, to have that data, share it with the public, and evaluate it and make corrections where they're necessary. So right now, the focus of the work is continuing to work with the COCL, PPB, DOJ, and BOEC to complete the evaluation of the effectiveness of the mental health response model. There's a focus on training for the coming year, which will include training all officers on de-escalation and implicit bias. I mentioned we're going to continue to work on refining the data collection, analysis, and quality improvement systems, and continuing to work on the timeliness of the accountability system. So at a sort of high level, that's the legal overview, and I will turn it over to Director Severe.
I think actually we were going to have a quick question and answer. Is there any questions you have right now that you would like to ask of Tracy on her presentation? This would be a good time to ask them. We're going to do this. We're going to have about 10 minutes for this max, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. Does anyone have any questions? Dan?
I'm wondering why the COCL isn't here to speak about the updates instead of having the city attorneys defending the defendant, representing the defendant in this lawsuit, present the update.
Thanks.
I think this was scheduled in order to start having a monthly opportunity to get some information out to the public, because the PSEP is not yet up and running. And the COCL wasn't scheduled to be in town when this was to occur. So I don't purport to be speaking on behalf of the COCL. That's why I was trying to give some information about how we are working with the COCL and where we are with that. The COCL will be here on April 19th and will be presenting their quarterly report, and will be coming to Portland and doing a quarterly report every quarter. So you will have the opportunity to receive the information directly from the COCL on those quarterly meetings.
Thank you.
You guys haven't followed the agreement for quite a while as far as the COAB goes. What makes everyone think that you're going to follow the settlement agreement now, even with the amendments?
The city is committing to do that. The city council has committed to do it, adopting the settlement agreement amendments, and that's a commitment that the city has made.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I've watched the COAB process over the 2 years as a volunteer, and a lot of what the city does that I'm very concerned about. Number one is the treatment of the Bull Run water system affects mental health from a very young age. And the interests involved in running this town are very disruptive to a peaceful existence and puts a lot of stress on the police to answer so many social problems. And this particular process hopefully addressed an overall look at the community. I don't get that feel from your responses here that there's enough public input still in the process to get to the real issues that will cause something to majorly change, because the judge came in because mentally ill were the ones that were being cruelly treated. And a horrible, horrible record. And we have so many more problems today, especially with the federal government stealing a lot of money, that we really need to focus on this issue. And it just seems like kind of a rush job at this point.
So thank you, and I want to, I'm sorry, Tracy, can I just say, Mandy's taking notes.
Right.
So what you're saying
Right.
is getting captured, I want to be sure you know that.
Right.
And then I'm just going to ask people to keep their questions as brief as possible so we can get through everybody, because we have a lot more presentation.
Judith,
But
I just want to
that's, but
respond.
that's, see,
Oh,
that's,
yeah, but Nicole from the mayor's office would like to respond to
Yeah.
that.
So to your point, with respect to mental health, I think one of the crucial issues with addressing that problem within the city of Portland is that it's not a city of Portland issue, right? Meaning that we are working with the county, and I think, we have additional reps from the mayor's office to speak on kind of these issues, Burke Nelson and Sarah P. Allen. It's a county issue, it's a mental health issue, it's not just PPB.
not in relation to COAB and.
But it's not just PPB and it's not just the COAB.
Right.
And I don't think any of us in this room should be approaching the COAB or should be approaching the PSEP as a panacea for addressing mental health issues in Portland, right? I think it's a
You
tool,
misrepresent the intent.
it's a tool, and we are looking, I'll get into this kind of during, my presentation, but we're looking
That's
to
what I'm
increase
concerned about
access.
is, you're not seeing the whole picture, and that's what disturbs me is living here for 25 years and being involved in things like Enron and all these things where our coffers are robbed, and we sit here and pay and pay and pay and pay and have more problems than ever.
So-
And this is a situation where we can have correction.
Right, so I did have two other hands
Yeah.
that went up, and I
Yeah.
want to keep moving, but there.
Just to respond to that, Judith, we'll get into the process, right?
Yeah.
We have been very intentional with the process surrounding PSEP to involve community members. And Mandy will further explain it kind of down the line, but this, we are intending to be a very community-driven process.
Thank you. Phyllis, you have a question.
Hi, I'm Philip Wolf. I'm the former COAB chair before COAB dismantled. I wanted to ask you, if possible tonight, to expand on exactly what the process is going to look like for a police-involved shooting and how they would go take that interview from when it happens to the end. What would that look like? What are the firewalls or the barriers in that process?
So if
The whole process, if you could break it down, is that possible to get addressed later tonight?
I don't want to jump on people, but that's right on the agenda. That'll be the update on the precept. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
Yes, and did I see one more hand up? Let's take one more question. Yes.
Charles Bridge Crane Johnson, and when the COAB was executed by the city refusing to do what it agreed to do by filling the seats that came vacant, and then the city became disturbed by the professional conduct of Judge Simon, a lot of hours in the city attorney's office were invested or wasted on getting to where we are today with PSEP. Has the city attorney's office or anyone released a memo letting us know how many staff hours were consumed and delegated to deciding that Judge Simon's actually not as bad as we said he is, and as the city said he was rather, and the workload that the city created for itself and its 40 or so city attorneys.
So is
Ms.
your
Roberts.
question whether or not a memo's been released that documented staff time put toward that effort?
Yes, please.
And the answer is no?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next part of the presentation. And again, I just wanna make sure everybody gets all the information and has time to speak. So next, we're gonna hear from Constantine Sever from the IPR.
good evening, everybody. My name is Constantine Severe. I am the director of the City of Portland's Independent Police Review. We are a division of the City Auditor's Office. So briefly talking about all the things that IPR has done under the settlement agreement, as everybody here knows, the settlement agreement first was approved by City Council back in 2012. There's been a number of IPR-related code changes that have happened since then. I believe there's at least like 4 of them that we've done. But since basically the summer, what we've been focused on is, one, the ability for IPR and Internal Affairs to have the ability to recommend findings. There was a code change back in late August of 2017 where Council approved that along with the ending of the 48-hour rule. As part